Hello and welcome to part 2 of my explaining all the spells in D&D video. I'll be just doing all level 1 spells this time, and I'm going to just jump right into it, but first I want to say thank you for watching. Again, I'm making this mainly for myself to listen to, so it's not going to be visually very exciting. Again, I'm going to use the same AI art-generated pictures to show each spell, and I will also note that I pretty much knew all the cantrips when I went over the cantrips, but most of these first level spells I don't have memorized yet, so I'm just going to be reading off exactly what they say, and it'll probably be the same for the rest of the levels after this one. But let's get right into things. Absorb Elements is a reaction spell, first level of course, which will last for 1 round after you cast it on yourself. The spell captures some of the incoming energy, lessening its effect on you and storing it for the next melee attack you make. You have resistance to the triggering damage type until the start of your next turn. Also, the first time you hit with a melee attack on your next turn, the target takes an extra 1d6 damage of the triggering type, and the spell ends. And if you cast this at higher levels, you can use a slot of 2nd level or higher. Extra damage increases by 1d6 for each slot above 1st. Next up we have Alarm, which is a ritual 1-minute casting time spell which lasts 8 hours. It has a range of 30 feet and requires verbal, semantic, and material components, the material component being a tiny bell and a piece of fine silver wire. You set an alarm against unwanted intrusions. Choose a door, a window, or an area within range that is no larger than a 20-foot cube. Until the spell ends, an alarm alerts you whenever a tiny or larger creature touches or enters the warded area. You can cast the spell. When you cast the spell, you can designate a creature that won't set off the alarm. You can also choose whether the alarm is mental or audible. A mental alarm alerts you with a ping in your mind. If you are within 1 mile of the warded area, this ping awakens you if you are sleeping. An audible alarm produces the sound of a handbell for 10 seconds within 60 feet. You cannot cast this at higher levels, we'll note. Next we have Animal Friendship, which is an action 24-hour lasting spell with a range of 30 feet, which will, using verbal, semantic, and material components, the material being a morsel of food, charm with a wisdom saving throw a beast that you can see within range. It must see and hear you, and if the beast's intelligence is 4 or higher, the spell will fail. Otherwise, if the beast fails its wisdom saving throw, it will be charmed, and for the spell's duration, if you or one of your companions harms the target, the spell ends. If you cast it at higher levels, you can affect 1 additional beast for each slot above 1st. Next we have Bane, which is a concentration action range of 30 feet, verbal, semantic, and material components, the material component being a drop of blood. Up to 3 creatures of your choice that you can see within range must make a charisma saving throw. Whenever a target fails the saving throw, makes an attack roll or saving throw before the spell ends, the target must roll a d4 and subtract the number rolled from the attack roll or saving throw. At higher levels, when you cast this spell, you can target 1 additional creature for each slot above 1st level. Beast Bond, which is a concentration touch-based spell requiring your action, verbal, semantic, material components, the material component being a bit of fur wrapped in cloth. And it will last for 10 minutes. You establish a telepathic link with 1 beast you touch that is friendly to you or charmed by you. The spell fails if the beast's intelligence is 4 or higher. Until the spell ends, the link is active while you and the beast are within line of sight of each other. Through this link, the beast can understand your telepathic messages to it, and it can telepathically communicate simple emotions and concepts back to you. While this link is active, the beast gains advantage on attack rolls against any creature within 5 feet of you, and you can see. Bless, a concentration 1-action cast time spell with a range of 30 feet, requiring verbal, semantic, and material components, the material component being a sparkling of holy water. It will last for 1 minute, and you can bless up to 3 creatures of your choice within range. Whenever a target makes an attack roll or a saving throw before the spell ends, the target can roll a d4 and add that number rolled to the attack roll or saving throw. Casting the spell at higher levels, with a second slot level or higher, you can target one additional creature for each slot level above first. Burning Hands, an action-based spell requiring verbal and semantic components, which as you hold your hands with thumbs touching the fingers spread, a thin sheet of flames shoot from your outstretched fingertips. Each creature within a 15-foot cone must make a dexterity saving throw. A creature takes 3d6 fire damage on a failed save, or half as much damage on a successful save. And the fire ignites any flammable objects in the area that aren't being worn or carried. And if you cast this at a slot higher than first level, the damage will increase by 1d6 for each slot above the first level. Catapult, an action spell with a range of 60 feet requiring only semantic components. Choose one object weighing 1 to 5 pounds within range that isn't being worn or carried. The object flies in a straight line up to 90 feet in a direction that you choose before falling to the ground, stopping early if it impacts against a solid surface. If the object would strike a creature, that creature must make a dexterity saving throw, and on a failed save, the object strikes the target and stops moving. When the object strikes something, the object and what it strikes take 3d8 bludgeoning damage. And if you cast this spell using a slot of second level or higher, the maximum weight of the object that can be targeted with the spell increases by 5 pounds, and the damage increases by 1d8 for each slot level above first. Next we have Charm Person, an action 30-foot ranged verbal and semantic component requiring spell that can last for 1 hour, where you attempt to charm a humanoid that you can see within range. It makes a wisdom saving throw and does so with advantage if you or your companions are fighting it. If it fails the saving throw, it is charmed by you until the spell ends or until you or your companions do anything harmful to it. The charmed creature regards you as a friendly acquaintance. When the spell ends, the creature knows it was charmed by you. And to cast this spell using a slot of second level or higher, you can target one additional creature for each slot level above first. The creature must be within 30 feet of each other when you target them. Color Spray, an action verbal semantic material components requiring spell that the material component being a pinch of powder or sand that is colored red, yellow, and blue, where a dazzling array of flashing colored lights springs from your hand. Roll 6d10. The total is how many hit points of a creature this spell can affect. Creatures in a 15-foot cone originating from you are affected in ascending order from their current hit points, ignoring unconscious creatures and creatures that can't see. Starting with the creature that has the lowest current hit points, each creature affected by the spell is blinded until the end of their next turn. Subtract the creature's hit points from the total before moving on to the creature with the next lowest hit points. A creature's hit points must be equal to or less than the remaining total for the creature to be affected. When you cast this spell using a slot higher than second or higher, roll an additional 2d10 for each slot above first. Command is an action 60-foot ranged spell requiring only verbal components, where you speak a one-word command to a creature you can see within range. The creature must succeed in a wisdom saving throw or follow the command on its next turn. The spell has no effect if the target is undead and if it doesn't understand your language or if the command is directly harmful to it. Some typical commands and their effects follow. You might issue a command other than the ones described here. If you do so, the DM determines how the target behaves. If the target can't follow your command, the spell ends. Examples are approach. The target moves towards you by the shortest and most direct route, ending its turn if it moves within 5 feet of you. Drop. The target drops whatever it's holding and then ends its turn. Flee. The target spends its turn moving away from you by the farthest available means. Grovel. The target falls prone and then ends its turn. Halt. The target doesn't move and takes no actions. A flying creature stays aloft provided that it is able to do so. If you must move to stay aloft, it flies the minimum distance needed to remain in the air. If you cast the spell using a slot second level or higher, you can affect one additional creature for each slot level above first. The creature must be within 30 feet of each other when you target them. comprehend language, which is a ritual, one action, cast time, verbal, semantic, and material component, requiring the material component being a pinch of soot and salt, where for the duration you understand the literal meaning of any spoken language that you hear. You also understand any written language that you see, but you must be touching the surface on which the words are written. It takes about 1 minute to read 1 page of text. This spell does not decode secret messages in a text or a glyph, such as an arcane sigil that is a part of a written language. Next we have Create or Destroy Water, which is a one action 30-foot range with a 30-foot cube range inside that range, requiring verbal, semantic, and material components. The material component being a drop of water if creating water, or a few grains of sand if destroying it. You can either create or destroy water. Create water, you create up to 10 gallons of clean water within range in an open container. Alternatively, the water falls as rain in a 30-foot cube within range, extinguishing exposed flames in the area. Destroy water, you can destroy up to 10 gallons of water in an open container within range. Alternatively, you destroy fog in a 30-foot cube within range. When you cast the spell using a slot 2nd level or higher, you can destroy an additional 10 gallons of water, or size of the cube increases by 5 feet for each slot above 1st. Cure Wounds, a one-action touch-based healing spell requiring verbal and semantic components. A creature you touch regains a number of hit points equal to 1d8 your spell plus your spellcasting modifier. The spell has no effect on undead or constructs. And when you cast the spell using a slot 2nd level or higher, the healing increases by 1d8 for each slot above 1st. Detect Good and Evil, a concentration action spell that lasts 10 minutes. It'll affect yourself, and you can sense an area within a 30-foot sphere of yourself, requiring verbal and semantic components. For the duration, you know if there is an aberration, celestial, elemental, fey, fiend, or undead within 30 feet of you, as well as where the creature is located. Similarly, you know if there is a place or object within 30 feet of you that may have been magically consecrated or desecrated. The spell can penetrate most barriers, but is blocked by 1 foot of stone, 1 inch of common metal, and a thin sheet of lead, or 3 feet of wood or dirt. Detect Magic, a concentration ritual spell where the spell will last 10 minutes after being cast, and it has a range of 30 feet from yourself, requiring verbal and semantic components. For the duration, you sense the presence of magic within a 30 feet of you. If you sense magic in this way, you can use your action to see a faint aura around any visible creature or object in the area that bears magic, and you learn its school of magic, if any. This spell can penetrate most barriers, but is blocked by 1 foot of stone, 1 inch of common metal, and a thin sheet of lead, or 3 feet of wood or dirt. Detect Poison and Disease, a concentration ritual, one action casting time that will last 10 minutes, and it requires verbal, semantic, and material components. The material component being a yew leaf. And for the duration, you can sense the presence and location of poisons, poisonous creatures, and diseases within 30 feet of you. You can also identify the kind of poison, poisonous creature, or disease in each case. The spell can penetrate most barriers, but is blocked by 1 foot of stone, 1 inch of common metal, and a thin sheet of lead, or 3 feet of wood or dirt. Disguise Self, a one-action self-range spell that lasts 1 hour, requiring verbal and semantic components, where you make yourself, including your clothing, armor, weapons, and other belongings on your person, look different until the spell ends or until you use your action to dismiss it. You can seem 1 foot shorter or taller, and it can appear thin, fat, or in between. You can't change your body type, so you must adapt a form that has a same basic arrangement of limbs. Otherwise, the extent of the illusion is up to you. The change is wrought by the spell fail to hold up physical inspection. For example, if you use this spell to add a hat to your outfit, objects pass through the hat, and anyone who touches it would feel nothing or feel your head and hair. If you use the spell to appear thinner than you are, if a hand of someone who reaches out to touch you would bump into you while it was seeming to still in midair. To discern that you are disguised, a creature must use an action to inspect your appearance and must succeed an intelligence investigation check against your spell save DC. Divine Favor, a concentration bonus action range of self spell that will last 1 minute and requires verbal and semantic components. Your prayer empowers you with divine radiance. Until the spell ends, your weapon attacks deal an extra 1d4 radiant damage on a hit. Next we have Earth Tremor, which is an action spell with a range of 10 feet requiring verbal and semantic components. You cause a tremor in the ground within range. Each creature other than you in the area must make a dexterity saving throw. On a failed save, a creature takes 1d6 bludgeoning damage and is knocked prone. If the ground in that area is loose earth or stone, it becomes difficult terrain until cleared, with each 5-foot diameter portion requiring at least 1 minute to clear by hand. And if you cast the spell using a slot level of 2nd level or higher, the damage is increased by 1d6 for each slot level above first. Entangle, a concentration action spell that will last for 1 minute with a range of 90 feet within a 20-foot cube, which requires verbal and semantic components. Grasping weeds and vines sprout from the ground in a 20-foot square cube starting from a point within range. For the duration, these plants turn the ground area into difficult terrain. A creature in the area when you cast a spell must succeed a strength saving throw or be restrained by the entangling plants until the spell ends. A creature restrained by the plants can use its action to make a strength check against your spell save DC. On a success, it frees itself. When the spell ends, the conjured plants wilt away. Expeditious Retreat, a constitution bonus action casting time which will last for 10 minutes, and you cast it on yourself. It requires verbal and semantic components. This spell will allow you to move at an incredible pace. When you cast the spell, and then as a bonus action on each of your turns until the spell ends, you can take the dash action. Fairy Fire, a concentration, 1 action cast time that will last for 1 minute upon being cast. It has a 60-foot range and is held within a 20-foot cube in that range, and requires only verbal components. Each object in a 20-foot cube within range is outlined in blue, green, or violet light, your choice. Any creature in the area when the spell is cast is also outlined in light if it fails a dexterity saving throw. For the duration, objects and affected creatures shed dim light for a 10-foot radius. Any attack roll against an unaffected creature or object has advantage if the attacker can see it, and the affected creature or object can't benefit from being invisible. False Life, an action spell that you cast on yourself that will last 1 hour, and it requires verbal, semantic, and material components. The material component being a small amount of alcohol or distilled spirits. Bolster yourself with a necrotic false simile of life and gain 1d4 plus 4 temporary hit points for the duration. When you cast this using a spell slot of 2nd level or higher, you gain 5 additional temporary hit points for each slot level above first. Featherfall, a reaction spell that will last for 1 minute after casting. It has a 60-foot range and requires verbal and material components, the material component being a small feather or piece of down. Choose up to 5 falling creatures within range. A falling creature's rate of descent slows to 60 feet per round until the spell ends. If the creature lands before the spell ends, it takes no falling damage and can land on its feet, and the spell ends for that creature. Find Familiar, a ritual casting time of 1 hour spell, which has a range of 10 feet and requires verbal, semantic, and material components. The material components being 10 gold pieces worth of charcoal, incense, and herbs, and it must be consumed by the fire in the brass brazier. You gain the service of a familiar, a spirit that takes an animal form. You choose bat, cat, crab, frog, toad, hawk, lizard, octopus, owl, poisonous snake, quipper, rat, raven, seahorse, spider, or weasel. Appearing as an unoccupied space within range, the familiar has the statistics of the chosen form, though it is in a celestial, fey, or fiend, your choice, instead of as a beast. Your familiar acts independently of you, but it always will obey your commands. In combat, it rolls its own initiative and acts on its own turn. A familiar can't attack, but it can take other actions as normal. When the familiar drops to 0 hit points, it disappears, leaving behind no physical form. It reappears after you cast the spell again. As an action, you can temporarily dismiss the familiar into a pocket dimension. Alternatively, you can dismiss it forever as an action while it's temporarily dismissed. You can cause it to reappear in any unoccupied space within 30 feet of you. Whenever the familiar drops to 0 hit points or disappears into the pocket dimension, it leaves behind in its space anything it was wearing or carrying. While your familiar is within 100 feet of you, you can communicate with it telepathically. Additionally, as an action, you can see through your familiar's eyes and hear what it hears until the start of your next turn, gaining the benefits of any special senses the familiar has. During this time, you are deaf and blind with regard to your own senses. You can't have more than one familiar at a time. If you cast a spell while you already have a familiar, you'll instead cause it to adopt a new form. Choose one of the forms from the above list. Your familiar transforms into the chosen creature. Finally, you can cast a spell within range of touch. Your familiar can deliver the spell as if you had cast the spell. Your familiar must be within 100 feet of you in order to use this, and it must use its reaction to deliver the spell when you cast it. If the spell requires an attack roll, you use your attack modifier for the roll. Next, we have Floating Disc, a ritual one-action spell with a range of 30 feet that lasts 1 hour. And it has verbal, semantic, and material components to it, the material component being a drop of mercury. The spell creates a circular, horizontal plane of force, 3 feet in diameter and 1 inch thick, that floats 3 feet above the ground in any unoccupied space of your choice that you can see within range. The disc remains for the duration and can hold up to 500 pounds. If more weight is placed on it, the spell ends and everything on the disc falls to the ground. The disc is immobile while you are within 20 feet of it, and if you move more than 20 feet away from it, the disc follows you so that it remains within 20 feet of you. It can move across uneven terrain, up or down stairs, slopes, and the like, but cannot cross an elevation change of 10 feet or more. For example, the disc can't move across a 10-foot deep pit, nor could it leave such a pit if it was created at the bottom. If you move more than 100 feet from the disc, typically because it can't move around an obstacle to follow you, the spell ends. Fog Cloud, a concentration action spell that lasts 1 hour, that has a range of 120 feet and affects an area of 20-foot sphere. It requires verbal and semantic components. You create a 20-foot radius sphere of cloud centered on a point within range. The sphere spreads around corners and its area is heavily obscured. It lasts for the duration or until a wind of moderate or greater speed, at least 10 miles per hour, disperses it. You can cast the spell using a spell slot 2nd level or higher. The radius of the fog increases by 20 feet for each slot above 1st level. Next, we have Goodberry, an action touch spell where it requires verbal, semantic, and material components. The material components being a sprig of mistletoe, and up to 10 berries will appear in your hand and are infused with magic for the duration. A creature can use its action to eat 1 berry. Eating a berry restores 1 hit point, and the berry provides enough nourishment to sustain a creature for 1 day. The berries lose their potency if they have not been consumed within 24 hours of casting the spell. Notably, they did not disappear. They just lose their ability to heal and sustain you for 1 day. They just become regular berries at that point. Is Grease, a 1-action casting spell which will last for 1 minute. It has a 60-foot range of a 10-foot cube. It requires verbal, semantic, and material components. The material components being a bit of pork rind or butter. where slick grease covers the ground in a 10-foot square centered on a point within range and turns it into difficult terrain for the duration. When the grease appears, each creature standing in its area must succeed on a dexterity saving throw or fall prone. A creature that enters the area or ends its turn there must also succeed on a dexterity saving throw or fall prone. Guiding Bolt, a one-action spell that has a range of 120 foot, and it has verbal and semantic components. A flash of light streaks toward a creature of your choice within range. Make a ranged spell attack against the target. On a hit, the target takes 4d6 radiant damage, and the next attack roll made against the target before the end of your next turn has advantage, thanks to the mystical dim light glittering the target until then. When you cast the spell using a slot 2nd level or higher, the damage increases by 1d6 for each spell slot level above 1st. Healing Word, a bonus action 60-foot range spell with verbal components. A creature of your choice that you can see within range regains hit points equal to 1d4 plus your spellcasting ability modifier. This spell has no effect on undead or constructs, and when you cast a spell using a spell slot 2nd level or higher, the healing increases by 1d4 for each spell slot level above 1st. Hellish Rebuke, a reaction spell that has a 60-foot range and requires verbal and semantic components. You point your finger at the creature that damaged you is momentarily surrounded by hellish flames. The creature must make a dexterity saving throw. It takes 2d10 fire damage on a failed save or half as much damage on a successful one. Notably, that the spell is cast after you take damage, so you can cast the spell as a reaction when you take damage. And the damage is increased by 1d10 for each slot above 1st if you cast it at higher levels. Heroism, a concentration action spell which lasts 1 minute, and you touch yourself to cast it. It's range of touch. It has a verbal and semantic components, and a willing creature you touch is imbued with bravery until the spell ends. The creature is immune to being frightened and gains temporary hit points equal to your spellcasting modifier at the start of each of its turns. When the spell ends, the target loses any remaining temporary hit points from the spell. When you cast the spell using a spell slot 2nd level or higher, you target 1 additional creature for each slot above 1st. Hideous Laughter, a concentration action spell with a range of 30 feet that will last for 1 minute upon being cast, and requires verbal, semantic, and material components. The material component being a tiny tarts or feather that is weaved in the air. A creature of your choice that you can see within range perceives everything as hilariously funny and falls into fits of laughter if the spell affects it. The target must succeed on a wisdom saving throw or fall prone, becoming incapacitated and unable to stand up for the duration. A creature with an intelligence score of 4 or less isn't affected. At the end of each of its turns, and each time it takes damage, the target can make another wisdom saving throw. The target has advantage on the saving throw if it's triggered by damage. On a success, the spell ends early. Hunter's Mark, a concentration bonus action cast time with a range of 90 feet that will last for 1 hour. It requires verbal components. You can choose a creature that you can see within range and a mystical mark on it as your quarry. Until the spell ends, you deal 1d6 extra damage to the target whenever you hit it with a weapon attack, and you have advantage on any wisdom, perception, or wisdom survival checks that you can make to find it. If the target drops to 0 hit points before the spell ends, you can use a bonus action on a subsequent turn of yours to mark a new creature without using a spell slot. When you cast the spell using a slot 3rd or 4th level, you can maintain your concentration on the spell for up to 8 hours. When you use a spell slot 5th level or higher, you can maintain your concentration on the spell for 24 hours. Ice Knife, a action 60-foot range with a 5-foot sphere attached to that range that requires semantic and material components, the material component being a drop of water or a piece of ice. You create a shard of ice and fling it at one creature within range. Make a ranged spell attack against the target. On a hit, the target takes 1d10 piercing damage. Hit or miss, the shard then explodes, and the target and each creature within 5 feet of it must succeed on a dexterity saving throw or take 2d6 cold damage. When you cast this spell using a spell slot 2nd level or higher, the cold damage increases by 1d6 for each slot level above 1st. Identify a ritual spell that requires 1 minute to cast, and it has a range of touch. Verbal, semantic, and material components, where the material component is a pearl worth at least 100 gold pieces and an owl feather. You can choose one object that you must touch throughout the casting of the spell. If it is a magic item or some other magical imbued object, you learn its properties and how to use them. Whether it requires attunement to use and how many charges it has, if any, you will learn whether any spells are affecting the item and what they are. If the item was created by a spell, you'll learn which spell created it. If you instead touch a creature throughout the casting, you learn what spells, if any, are currently affecting it. I will also note that it requires a pearl worth at least 100 gold pieces, but it doesn't consume that pearl. So you don't have to worry about getting tons of pearls to cast this over and over again. Illusory Script, which is a ritual 1-minute casting time, which will last for 10 days upon casting, and you must touch the object to cast it. It has a semantic and material components, where the material components is a lead-based ink worth at least 10 gold pieces, which the spell consumes. You write on a parchment paper or some other suitable writing material and imbue it with potent illusions that last for the duration. To you and any creature you designate when you cast the spell, the writing appears normal, written in your hand, and conveys whatever meaning you intended when you wrote the text. To all others, the writing appears as if you were written in an unknown or magical script that is unintelligible. Alternatively, you could cause the writing to appear to be an entirely different message, written in a different hand and language, though the language must be one you know. Should the spell be dispelled, the original script and illusion both disappear. A creature with true sight can read the hidden message. Inflict Wounds, an action touch range spell that requires verbal and semantic components, where you make a melee spell attack against a creature you can reach. On a hit, the target takes 3d10 necrotic damage, and when you cast the spell using a spell slot of 2nd level or higher, the damage increases by 1d10 for each slot above 1st. Next we have Jump, an action spell that lasts for 1 minute, where you touch a creature, that creature's jump distance is tripled until the spell ends, requiring verbal, semantic, and material components, the material component being a grasshopper's hind leg. Long Strider, a 1-action spell that requires you to touch a creature. It lasts for 1 hour, requires verbal, semantic, and material components, the material component being a pinch of dirt. You touch a creature and the target's speed increases by 10 feet until the spell ends. When you cast this spell using a slot of 2nd level or higher, you can target 1 additional creature for each slot above 1st level. Mage Armor, a 1-action touch spell where you require verbal, semantic, and material components, and will last for 8 hours after being cast. You touch a willing creature who isn't wearing armor, and a protective magical force surrounds it until the spell ends. The target's base AC becomes 13 plus its dexterity modifier. The spell ends if the target dons armor or if you dismiss the spell as an action. And it requires the material component being a piece of cured leather. Magic Missile, a 1-action 120-foot range spell that will require verbal and semantic components. You create 3 glowing darts of magical force. Each dart hits a creature of your choice that you can see within range. The darts deal 1d4 plus 1 force damage to its target. The darts all strike simultaneously, and you can direct them to hit 1 creature or several. Notably, these just hit. There's no attack roll or saving throw. Magic Missile always hits. When you cast the spell using a spell slot of 2nd level or higher, the spell creates 1 more dart for each spell slot above 1st level. Protection from Evil and Good, a concentration 1-action spell that has a range of touch and will last for 10 minutes upon being cast. It requires verbal, semantic, and material components. And until the spell ends, one willing creature you touch is protected against certain types of creatures: aberrations, celestials, elementals, fae, fiends, and undead. The protection grants several benefits to the creature. Of those types have disadvantage on attack rolls against the target. The target also can't be charmed, frightened, or possessed by them. If the target is already charmed or frightened or possessed by such a creature, the target has advantage on any new saving throw against the relevant effect. The material component is holy water or powdered silver and iron, which the spell consumes. Purify food and drink, a ritual one-action cast time, where the range is 10 feet in a 5-foot sphere, and it requires verbal and semantic components. All non-magical food and drink within a 5-foot radius sphere centered on a point of your choice within range is purified and rendered free of poison and disease. Sanctuary, a bonus action spell that lasts for 1 minute and has a range of 30 feet, requiring verbal, semantic, and material components, the material component being a small silver mirror. You ward a creature within range against an attack. Until the spell ends, any creature who targets the warded creature with an attack or harmful spell must first make a wisdom saving throw. On a failed save, the creature must choose a new target or lose the attack or spell. The spell does not protect the warded creature from area effects, such as an explosion of a fireball. If the warded creature makes an attack, casts a spell that affects an enemy, or deals damage to another creature, the spell ends. Shield, a reaction spell where you can use this spell as a reaction whenever you are hit by an attack or targeted by the magic missile spell. It will last for 1 round, and you target yourself with verbal and semantic components. An invisible barrier of magical force appears and protects you. Until the start of your next turn, you have a +5 bonus to AC, including against the triggering attack, and you take no damage from the magic missile spell. Shield of Faith, a concentration bonus action cast with a range of 60 feet, requiring verbal, semantic, and material components, the material component being a small parchment with a bit of holy text written on it. It will last for 10 minutes, and a shimmering field appears and surrounds a creature of your choice within range, granting it a +2 bonus to its AC for the duration. Silent Image, a concentration action spell that lasts 10 minutes and has a range of 60 feet within a 15-foot cube. It requires verbal, semantic, and material components, the material component being a bit of fleece, where you can create an image of an object or creature or some other visible phenomenon that is no larger than a 15-foot cube. The image appears in a spot within range and lasts for the duration. The image is purely visual. It isn't accompanied by sound, smell, or other sensory effects. You can use your action to cause the image to move to any spot within range. As the image changes locations, you can alter its appearance so that its movements appear natural for the image. For example, you can create the image of a creature and move it, and you can alter the image so it appears to be walking. Physical interaction with the image reveals it to be an illusion, because things can pass through it. A creature that uses its action to examine the image can determine that it is an illusion with a successful intelligence investigation check against your spell save DC. If a creature discerns the illusion for what it is, the creature can see through the image. Sleep, a one-action cast time with a range of 90 feet and within a 20-foot sphere, where the duration will last for 1 minute, and it requires verbal, semantic, and material components, the material component being a pinch of fine sand, rose petals, or a cricket. This spell sends a creature into a magical slumber. Roll 5d8. The total is how many hit points of a creature this spell can affect. Creatures within 20 feet of a point you choose within range are affected, in ascending order of their current hit points, ignoring unconscious creatures. Starting with the creature that has the lowest current hit points, each creature affected by this spell falls unconscious until the spell ends. The sleeper takes damage or someone uses an action to shake or slap the sleeper awake. Subtract each creature's hit points from the total before moving to the creature with the next lowest hit points. A creature's hit points must be equal to or less than the remaining total for that creature to be affected. Undead and creatures immune to being charmed aren't affected by this spell. When you cast the spell using a slot 2nd level or higher, roll an additional 2d8 for each level above 1st. Speak with Animals, a 1-action ritual spell that will last for 10 minutes upon being cast on yourself, and it requires verbal and semantic components. You gain the ability to comprehend and verbally communicate with beasts for the duration. The knowledge and awareness of many beasts is limited by their intelligence, but at minimum, beasts can give you information about nearby locations and monsters, including whatever they can perceive and have perceived within the past day. You might also be able to persuade a beast to perform a small favor for you at the DM's discretion. Next up, Thunder Wave, a 1-action range of 15-foot cube from yourself, a verbal and semantic requirement, and a wave of thunderous force sweeps out from you. Each creature within a 15-foot cube originating from you must make a Constitution saving throw. On a failed save, the creature takes 2d8 thunder damage and is pushed 10 feet away from you. On a successful save, the creature takes half as much damage and isn't pushed. In addition, unsecured objects that are completely within the area of effect are automatically pushed 10 feet away from you by the spell's effect. The spell emits a thunderous boom audible up to 300 feet away. When you cast the spell using a spell slot of 2nd level or higher, the damage increases by 1d8 for each slot above 1st. Unseen Servant, a ritual 1-action cast time which will last for 1 hour and has a range of 60 feet, requiring verbal, semantic, and material components. The material component being a bit of string and of wood. Once on each of your turns as a bonus action, you can mentally command the servant to move up to 15 feet and interact with an object. The servant can perform simple tasks that a human servant could do, such as fetching things, cleaning, mending, folding clothes, lighting fires, serving food, and pouring wine. Once you give the command, the servant performs the task to the best of its ability, until it completes the task, then awaits for your next command. If you command the servant to perform a task that would move it more than 60 feet away from you, the spell ends. Wrathful Smite, a concentration bonus action spell which will last for up to 1 minute, requiring verbal components. The next time you hit with a melee weapon attack during the spell's duration, your attack deals an extra 1d6 psychic damage. Additionally, if the target is a creature, it must make a wisdom saving throw or be frightened of you until the spell ends. As an action, the creature can make a wisdom check against your spell save DC to steal its resolve and end the spell. Witch Bolt, a concentration action spell with a range of 30 feet, requiring verbal, semantic, and material components. The material component being a twig from a tree that has been struck by lightning. A beam of crackling blue energy lances out toward a creature within range, forming a sustained arc of lightning between you and the target. Make a ranged spell attack against that creature. On a hit, the target takes 1d12 lightning damage, and on each of your turns for the duration, you can use your action to deal 1d12 lightning damage to the target automatically. The spell ends if you use your action to do anything else. The spell also ends if the target is ever outside the spell's range, or if it has total cover from you. If you cast this spell using a slot of 2nd level or higher, the initial damage is increased by 1d12 for each slot above 1st level. Thunderous Smite, which requires concentration and is a bonus action cast upon yourself, which will last for 1 minute. It requires verbal components, and the first time you hit with a melee attack weapon during this spell's duration, your weapon rings with thunder that is audible within 300 feet of you, and the attack deals 2d6 thunder damage to the target. Additionally, if the target is a creature, it must succeed on a strength saving throw or be pushed 10 feet away from you and knocked prone. Tasha's Caustic Brew, a concentration spell that requires your action and has a range of self within a 30-foot line from yourself, and requires verbal, semantic, and material components. The material component being a bit of rotten food. It'll last up to a minute. A stream of acid emanates from you in a line 30 feet long and 5 feet wide in any direction you choose. Each creature in the line must succeed a dexterity saving throw or be covered in acid for the spell's duration, or until a creature uses its action to scrape or wash the acid off itself or another creature. A creature covered in acid takes 2d4 acid damage at the start of its turns. When you cast the spell using a slot 2nd level or higher, the damage increases by 2d4 for each slot above 1st level. Snare, a 1-minute cast time with a range of touch, which requires verbal, semantic, and material components. The material component being 30 feet of cord or rope, which is consumed by the spell. The duration will last until dispelled or triggered. When you cast the spell, you can use a cord or rope to create a circle within a 5-foot radius on a flat surface within your reach. When you finish casting, the cord or rope disappears to become a magical trap. The trap is nearly invisible and requires a successful intelligence investigation check against your spell save DC to be found. The trap triggers when a small creature or larger moves into the area protected by the spell. The triggering creature must succeed on a dexterity saving throw or fall prone and be hoisted into the air until it hangs upside down 3 feet above protected surface where it is restrained. The restrained creature can make a dexterity saving throw with disadvantage at the end of each of its turns and ends the restrained effect on a success. Alternatively, another creature that can reach the restrained creature can use an action to make an intelligence arcana check against your spell save DC. On a success, the restrained creature is taken out of the effect also. Silvery Barbs, a reaction spell that you can take when a creature you can see within 60 feet of yourself succeeds on an attack roll, an ability check, or a saving throw. It has a range of 60 feet and requires only verbal components. You magically distract the triggering creature and turn its momentary uncertainty into encouragement for another creature. The triggering creature must re-roll the d20 and use the lower roll. You can then choose a different creature you can see within range. You can choose yourself. The chosen creature has advantage on the next attack roll, ability check, or saving throw it makes within 1 minute. A creature can be empowered by only one use of the spell at a time. Searing Smite, a concentration spell requiring your bonus action to cast on yourself using verbal components, and the next time you hit a creature with a melee weapon attacked during the spell's duration, your weapon flares with white-hot intensity, and the attack deals an extra 1d6 fire damage to the target and causes the target to ignite in flames. At the start of each of its turns, until the spell ends, the target must make a Constitution saving throw. On a failed save, it takes 1d6 fire damage. On a successful save, the spell ends. If the target or a creature within 5 feet of it uses its action to put out the flames, or if some other effect douses the flames, such as a target being submerged in water, the spell ends. And if you cast the spell using a slot of 2nd level or higher, the initial extra damage dealt by the attack increases by 1d6 for each slot. Ray of Sickness, an action spell with a range of 60 feet requiring verbal and semantic components. A ray of sickening greenish energy lashes out toward a creature within range. Make a ranged spell attack against the target. On a hit, the target takes 2d8 poison damage and must make a Constitution saving throw. On a failed save, it is also poisoned until the end of your next turn. When you cast this spell using a spell slot of 2nd level or higher, the damage increases by 1d8 for each slot level above 1st. Magnify Gravity, an action spell with a range of 60 feet requiring verbal and semantic components, and it will last for 1 round. The gravity in a 10-foot radius sphere centered on a point you can see within range increases for a moment. Each creature in that sphere on the turn when you cast the spell must make a Constitution saving throw. On a failed save, a creature takes 2d8 force damage and its speed is halved until the end of the next turn. On a successful save, a creature takes half as much damage and suffers no reduction to its speed. Until the start of your next turn, any object that isn't being worn or carried in the sphere requires a successful strength check against your spell save DC to pick up or move. When you cast the spell using a slot level of second level or higher, the damage is increased by 1d8 for each slot level above first. Jim's Magic Missile, which requires your action to cast and has a range of 120 feet, requiring verbal, semantic, and material components. The material component being 1 gold coin, which is consumed as a tax for using this spell. You create 3 twisting, whistling, hypoallergenic, gluten-free darts of magical force. Each dart can target a creature of your choice that you can see within range. Make a ranged spell attack for each missile. On a hit, the missile does 2d4 force damage. If the attack roll scores a critical, the missile does 5d4 force damage instead of the 4d4 force damage you would normally do on a critical. If any of the attack roll is a natural 1, all missiles turn around and hit the caster for 1 force damage per missile. When you cast the spell using a spell slot of second level or higher, the spell creates 1 more dart for each slot above first level. It also increases the tax by 1 gold piece per slot level over first. Hex, a concentration bonus action spell with a range of 90 feet, requiring verbal, semantic, and material components. The material component is the Petrified Eye of a Newt. It can last for up to 1 hour, and you place a curse on a creature that you can see within range. Until the spell ends, you deal an extra 1d6 necrotic damage to the target whenever you hit it with an attack. Also choose 1 ability when you cast the spell. The target has disadvantage on ability checks made with the chosen ability. If the target drops to 0 hit points before the spell ends, you can use a bonus action on a subsequent turn of yours to curse a new creature. A remove curse cast on the target ends the spell early. When you cast the spell using a spell slot of 3rd or 4th level, you can maintain your concentration on the spell for up to 8 hours. And when you use a spell slot of 5th level or higher, you can maintain your concentration on the spell for up to 24 hours. Hail of Thorns, a concentration bonus action spell where you cast on yourself, and it requires verbal components, lasting up to 1 minute. The next time you hit a creature with a ranged attack before the spell ends, this spell creates a rain of thorns that sprouts from your ranged weapon or ammunition. In addition to the normal effect of the attack, the target of the attack and each creature within 5 feet of it must make a dexterity saving throw. A creature takes 1d10 piercing damage on a failed save, or half as much damage on a successful one. At higher levels, if you cast this spell using a 2nd slot level or higher, the damage increases by 1d10 for each slot level above first, a maximum of 6d10. Next we have Gift of Alacrity, which is a 1 minute casting time spell, which requires verbal and semantic components and lasts 8 hours. You touch a willing creature. For the duration, the target can add 1d8 to its initiative rolls. Frost Fingers, a 1 action which you can cast within a 15-foot cone of yourself, requiring verbal and semantic components. Freezing cold blasts from your fingertips in a 15-foot cone. Each creature in the area must make a Constitution saving throw, taking 6d8 cold damage on a failed save, or half as much damage on a successful one. The cold freezes non-magical liquids in the area that aren't being worn or carried. And if you cast a spell using a spell slot of 2nd level or higher, the damage increases by 1d8 for each level above first. Ensnaring Strike, which is a concentration bonus action spell where you cast on yourself, requiring verbal components and lasts up to 1 minute. The next time you hit a creature with a weapon attack before the spell ends, a writhing mass of thorny vines appears at a point of impact, and the target must succeed a strength saving throw or be restrained by magical vines until the spell ends. A large or larger creature has advantage on the saving throw. If the target succeeds on the save, the vines shrivel away. While restrained by the spell, the target takes 1d6 piercing damage at the start of each of its turns. A creature restrained by the vines or one that can't touch the creature can use its action to make a strength check against the spell save DC. On a success, the target is freed. If you cast the spell using a slot of 2nd level or higher, the damage increases by 1d6 for each slot above first. Distort Value. A 1-minute casting time spell that can be cast for a duration of 8 hours, requiring your verbal components. And you cast a spell on an object no more than 1 foot on a side, doubling the object's perceived value by adding Illusionary Flourish or reducing its perceived value by half with the help of Illusionary Dents or Scratches. Anyone examining the object must roll an investigation check against your spell save DC. When you cast this spell using a higher spell slot, you increase the size of the object by 1 foot per spell slot above first. Up is Dissonant Whispers, a 1-action cast time with a range of 60 feet, requiring verbal components. You whisper a discordant melody that only one creature of your choice within range can hear. Racking it with terrible pain, the target must make a wisdom saving throw. On a failed save, it takes 3d6 psychic damage and must immediately use its reaction, if available, to move as far as its speed allows away from you. The creature doesn't move in obviously dangerous ground, such as fire or a pit. On a successful save, the target takes half as much damage and doesn't move away. A deafened creature automatically succeeds on the save. When you cast this spell using a spell slot of 2nd level or higher, the damage increases by 1d6 for each spell slot level above first. Chaos Bolt, which is a 1-action, 120-foot range spell requiring verbal and semantic components. You hurl an undulating, warbling mass of chaotic energy at one creature in range. Make a spell-ranged attack roll against the target, and on a hit, the target takes 2d8 plus 1d6 damage. Choose one of the d8s the number is rolled on that die to determine the attack's damage type, as shown below. A 1 would deal acid damage, a 2 cold damage, a 3 fire damage, a 4 force damage, 5 is lightning damage, 6 is poison damage, 7 is psychic damage, and 8 is thunder damage. If you roll the same number on both d8s, the chaotic energy leaps from the target to a different creature of your choice within 30 feet of it. Make a new attack roll against the new target, and make a new damage roll, which could cause the chaotic energy to leap again. A creature can be targeted only once by each casting of the spell. When you cast the spell using a spell slot 2nd level or higher, each target takes 1d6 extra damage of the type rolled for each slot above first. Compelled Duel, a concentration bonus action with a range of 30 feet, requiring verbal components and will last for 1 minute. You attempt to compel a creature into a duel. One creature that you can see within range must make a wisdom saving throw. On a failed save, the creature is drawn to you, compelled by your divine demand. For the duration, it has a disadvantage on attack rolls against creatures other than you, and must make a wisdom saving throw each time it attempts to move to a space that is more than 30 feet away from you. If it succeeds on its saving throw, the spell doesn't restrict the target's movement for that turn. The spell ends if you attack any other creature. If you cast a spell that targets a hostile creature other than the target, if the creature friendly to you damages the target or casts harmful spells on it, or if you end your turn more than 30 feet away from the target. Chromatic Orb is an action 90-foot range spell requiring verbal, semantic, and material components. The material component being a diamond worth at least 50 gold pieces. You hurl a 4-inch diameter sphere of energy at a creature that you can see within range. You choose acid, cold, fire, lightning, poison, or thunder for the type of orb you can create, and then make a ranged spell attack against the target. If the attack hits, the creature takes 3d8 damage of the type you chose. When you cast the spell using a spell slot of 2nd level or higher, the damage increases by 1d8 for each spell slot above first. Ceremony. A ritual spell with a casting time of 1 hour, which requires verbal, semantic, and material components. 25 gold pieces worth of powdered silver, which the spell consumes, is the material component, where you can perform one of several religious ceremonies when you cast this spell. Choose one of the following ceremonies, the target of which must be within 10 feet of you throughout the casting. Atonement. You touch one willing creature whose alignment has changed, and you make a DC 20 Wisdom Insight check. On a successful check, you restore the target to its original alignment. Bless water. You touch one vial of water and cause it to become holy water. Coming of age. You touch one humanoid who is a young adult. For the next 24 hours, whenever the target makes an ability check, it can roll a d4 and add the number rolled to the ability check. A creature can benefit from this rite only once. Funeral rite. You touch one corpse, and for the next 7 days, the target can't become undead by any means short of the wish spell. Dedication. You touch one humanoid who wishes to be dedicated. For the next 24 hours, whenever the target makes a saving throw, it can roll a d4 and add the number rolled to the save. The creature can only benefit from this rite once. Investiture. You touch one willing humanoid. Choose one first-level spell that you have prepared and expend a spell slot and any material component as if you were casting the spell. The spell has no effect. Instead, the target can cast this spell once without having to expend a spell slot or use material components. If the target doesn't cast the spell within 1 hour, the invested spell slot is lost. Wedding. You touch an adult humanoids willing to be bonded together in marriage. For the next 7 days, each target gains a +2 bonus to AC while they are within 30 feet of each other. A creature can benefit from this rite again only if widowed. Cause Fear, a concentration action spell with a range of 60 feet, requiring verbal components, and can be concentrated on for up to a minute. You awaken a sense of mortality in one creature you can see within range. A construct or undead is immune to this effect. The target must succeed on a wisdom saving throw or become frightened of you until the spell ends. The frightened target can repeat the saving throw at the end of each of its turns, ending the effect on itself on a success. When you cast the spell using a slot of 2nd level or higher, you can target one additional creature for each slot above first. The creature must be within 30 feet of each other when you target them. Arms of Hadar. A casting time of 1 action with a 10-foot radius around yourself. Verbal and semantic components. You invoke the power of Hadar, the dark hunger. Tendrils of dark energy erupt from you and batter all creatures within 10 feet of you. Each creature in that area must make a strength saving throw. On a failed save, the target takes 2d6 necrotic damage and can't take reactions until its next turn. On a successful save, the creature takes half damage but suffers no other effect. When you cast the spell using a slot of 2nd level or higher, the damage is increased by 1d6 for each slot above first. Armor of Agathis. A casting time of 1 action, which you cast on yourself using verbal, semantic, and material components. The material component being a cup of water. It'll last for 1 hour. A protective magical force surrounds you, manifests as a spectral frost that covers you and your gear. You gain 5 temporary hit points for the duration. If a creature hits you with a melee attack while you have these hit points, the creature takes 5 cold damage. And if you cast the spell using a spell slot of 2nd level or higher, both temporary hit points and the cold damage is increased by 5 for each slot. And finally we have Zithier Strike, which is a concentration bonus action cast, which lasts up to 1 minute with a verbal component. You cast it on yourself, and then you can move like the wind. For the duration, your movement doesn't provoke opportunity attacks, and once before the spell ends, you can give yourself advantage on 1 weapon attack roll on your turn. That attack deals an extra 1d8 force damage on a hit. Whether you hit or miss, your walking speed increases by 30 feet until the end of that turn. That is all for 1st level slot spells. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Again, it's mainly for myself because I couldn't find anything on YouTube that kind of fit what I was looking for, because I want to listen to this because I want to memorize every spell. I quickly realized that first level spells, there's a lot more spells than there are cantrips, and the cantrips was already pretty long. So I'm kind of wondering how long this entire video is going to be once I get them all made. I'm expecting it to probably be around 9 hours, the full one that goes over every single spell. But I guess we'll have to wait and see. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please like it, and thanks for watching. Goodbye.